Waiting on anything?
Wait, I'm fine, because you want to wait
Okay,
for
1
the
minute?
Yeah.
What'd you say? I'm sorry, are we waiting for something? or-
One person? It's on the wrong floor?
We went to the election room.
All right, we'll just get started. I don't know how long it takes to get down here.
Okay, let me get the recording going. Okay, we're recording. This is a collective bargaining session between Pasco County and the International Brotherhood of Teamsters Local 79, February the 3rd, 2016. I'm Jim Sheriff.
Barbara Goodson. Stephanie Sperman.
Representing the county is John Schultes.
Doug Eck, representing Local 79.
Ed Seidzik, Pasco County Utilities.
Pam White at Pasco County Libraries.
Tom Longman, Fleet, James Boucher, Transportation.
All right, John, I thought we had about as much detailed discussion as we could have at the last bargaining session, and we completely understand the union's point of view on a lot of important issues to the union. We went back, we looked through the contract, open articles. I've got copies for you of those, which we've made some modifications to. I think this represents the movement that we could make in response to the comments and discussion that we had last time. So there should be enough. I might have another one or two, so let me know if that's enough. Everybody got one? Okay. Is there an extra one for? There you go. All right, so let me tell you what I've done here. These are the articles that I indicate as open following the last bargaining session. Article 3, the just cause discipline provision. We've made movement towards your position in previous bargaining sessions, significantly in paragraph G.
Should we know what the color coding is? Would that help?
The only color coding that's going to be important, I think, for your review today will be what's going to be highlighted in yellow as we get further into it. If you don't see a yellow highlighting,
There's no change from the last
I don't
time.
think there's any change from the last bargaining session. The color coding, just so you know, represents an indication of where I added language or Barbara added language.
Yeah, and obviously my biggest concern is what's different from last time. So
Yeah, that's only the yellow, right? The
It's
yellow
only going to be the
highlight.
yellow.
So you'll,
I think I
you'll see
picked
some
up
yellow
all that.
County
highlighting.
yellow.
Yeah, it's gonna be very little change, I think.
I'm not even to interrupt, so I gotta continue. You said in G, there's.
All right, so G addressed your concern that older discipline should simply disappear. Our position, of course, originally was that it would never disappear, but it would have less and less and less weight until basically it had no weight for the purposes of considering progressive discipline. But this language in G is a compromise towards a 7-year expiration period for discipline with a couple of very important exceptions to us, which is drug abuse or workplace violence. Those have no expiration date. There's no change in what our position has been on Article 16, union stewards. The bottom line for us is that, with very rare exceptions as outlined here in paragraph B, which is representative activity, we can't think of another category where we don't think that the employee who is engaging in union business should not be paid by the union or by their coworkers. The county hired these individuals to do a very particular job. That's the job that we pay for. We don't pay for the other activity. We've made this point several times before, so our position is unchanged on that.
Well, and just for the record, it's not about paying an employee, it's about resolving workplace issues, which should have a value. And
It does. The process has a value to us. Paying the employee to represent the union's point of view on it does not.
well, that's what you bring to your value.
Okay, Article 17. This is the union leave account. You've still not accepted that concept, but we changed the language in D. It had made reference to January 2016. We'd hoped we'd have a contract by that point, so it would be easy to implement. We've simply changed the language to the first pay period following ratification. And it's a 2-hour annual voluntary donation by employees to the leave account. Okay. I think it was Frank at one point said something to you, asked the question whether that time would count as, for the purposes of overtime. That's addressed in this last paragraph. There's no change in our position on 18, which is to provide for a 60-day extension period for the probationary period. There's no change in our position on 19, deals with the time that employees are in collective bargaining.
Do you have just a general question, do you have a concern whether or not the union determines on a case-by-case basis whether or not one of the bargaining team members is going to be compensated from the pool, or in certain cases by the local union, but it doesn't matter to you?
It does not matter to us.
I didn't think so, that's what I'm asking.
Article 19, no change in our position on the role of the negotiators and their paid or unpaid status.
The previous language, this is current contract right now. Let me check something in there. Because that 5 days is not being adhered to, so if you could make sure that that is occurring. The notice to the supervisor.
Yeah, we've lessened the requirement, it used to have to be by email submitted to the supervisor and the HR director. You asked us to take the HR director out of the mix. We did that.
Actually, we didn't care about the HR director, what we cared about was the email.
So that we took that out, so just.
But they do have to bring their supervisor at least 5 days in advance. I mean, these sessions are notified. I mean, we set this one up 3 weeks in advance, and somebody tried to submit one yesterday, and it did not go over well, so. And I think it was denied, so. Well, it was Frank, so I'm not really sure what's going on right now, because I know the leave was denied. Because he had a job to be on this morning, so.
We set these bargaining dates pretty far in advance, so it should be relatively easy to make the request. When you think about it, not in all cases, but in most cases, we've been now setting them at the end of the bargaining session, simply to be confirmed. If the members that are here that, want that time off, they could just say so right then, or pass something across the table, or, it's just a formality we do need to have. It's an operational issue.
Giving supervisors, no longer the HR director would give supervisors notice.
A minimum of 5 days notice.
I thought you said you didn't need the 48-hour notice.
No. We
We have a
said,
contract that says it's
contract
required.
says it's required.
I'm just saying what Barbara said in one of the last 2 meetings, I think it was.
I don't need the notice. We talked about the HR director not needing the notice, that's correct, but the supervisors always need the notice. They have to be notified a minimum of 5 days in advance, otherwise the leave's not approved.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right, Article 20, this is just clean up on a couple of clauses on the first and last page, on page 27 and 29. Language changes that you suggested last time, which we're amenable
Is
to,
that what they're saying?
using the word resolve instead of, I think it said dealt with. And then arbitrations can be held if it's convenient to the union and the county.
Yeah. I
Other
think you
than
guys brought that up last time,
arbitration.
right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yep.
Article 21, seniority. This, of course, is the big one, and there's no change in our position on seniority. Article 23, safety committee. He had suggested consolidating the department safety as A and the countywide as B. That's what I've done. I don't think there's any substantive change in the language other than to consolidate those two categories.
I'm sorry, just go back to scenario for a
Sure.
minute. On section 3, letter F, it came up in a recent situation, it's just, I guess, Barbara's understanding or reading the language that, like G being broken out into, I mean, first of all, the formatting is kind of peculiar, I guess, somehow. And would you agree that, I mean, G falls under section 3, right?
Right?
So,
So it relates to 1 and 2 preceding it.
would you agree that G is actually, is just a continuation of F? And it sounds, you know, kind of ridiculous to be worrying about little letters, but those little letters cause problems. And meaning that, in cases, I'm reading G, in cases when an employee's seniority is not a deciding factor, the county shall articulate its justification. But that is that a continuation of F, or is that a standalone, like it's identified as a standalone letter?
Well, the seniority only comes into play with respect to F1 and 2.
Right.
So, formatting wise, I think it makes more sense as G would certainly get that.
I'm just asking.
What problem does it have as a standard?
Yeah, I guess I'm not seeing the,
Yeah.
what would you say the difference would be? Give me a scenario that one would, you feel like one would be one way, but this interpretation would be a different way.
Well, where the problem came up is when you specifically said, Barbara, that we don't have the ability to file a grievance over seniority. Out of your mouth, that's what you said. And read G, but why don't you understand? I said, well, you weren't there when G was written, and I was. And so, there certainly can be a grievable issue if there's a case of a layoff, you know, not, a seniority not applying to a layoff, or if there was no consideration for a vocational job assignment, and further, if the county did not take the time to articulate its reason, then we would have a grievance on the fact that the county didn't articulate its reason, and didn't have a reason, didn't have any justification. And so, I just want, you know, no misunderstanding that we certainly can file a grievance, you know, under this scenario where if there was a locational component to the job assignment, traditionally been bid, seniority is a factor that must be taken into consideration, but it's not the deciding factor. And case in point would be the transit department, where they've always bid.
Right, but this says that it says job assignments which have a locational component, and job assignment has traditionally been bid. Seniority is a factor that must be taken in, but is not the deciding factor. So that, I think that language is really clear.
Right, but the thing is, you don't believe we have the ability to file a grievance.
I
It's, the
believe
last clause says that the decision is not subject to appeal or grievance.
Right.
Okay. So what about the issue of using a seniority-based system for bidding at all? Suppose that ceased tomorrow.
Then I would say that that's okay, as long, it
No,
says
it's not okay.
seniority is a
It's not
factor
okay.
that must be taken into consideration, but is not the deciding
It's not
factor,
okay.
so,
It's not okay. It has to be, that would be a past practice, a long-standing practice that existed forever. That's what was conveyed when we agreed to this language, and here we come with the ugly head. So-
well, I think that past practice is one thing, but when you clearly have an article that was written specifically for this, past practice is not relevant when you have an article that specifically addresses this. And what this says is seniority is a factor that must be taken into consideration, but is not the deciding factor. So I think, you know, to that extent, if there's another deciding factor, then that's okay. I mean, I mean,
Next.
that's what it says.
Next.
Can I talk about safety committee? On Article 34, I just tried to simplify the language to articulate our position on light duty assignments. If an employee, in conjunction with a workers' comp injury, returns and accepts light duty, they do so at 80% of their regular rate of pay. That's our proposal.
I had a question on that.
That's not what it's been. If you do like it, you can pay.
Are you saying that only employees who are placed on light duty retain their seniority? Or is that kind of an oversight? In other words, people who are on workers' comp would retain their seniority.
Yeah, they always do. I mean, there's, workers' comp doesn't affect your seniority. I mean, if you were to, well, let me put it this way. So if you were to apply for and accept another position, I'll give you for instance. So we have a guy right now.
Actually, I'll say a whole bunch of other,
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, a whole bunch of conversation.
Yeah.
Employees placed in a worker, or employees on workers' compensation will retain their benefits, including seniority. That's what I'm looking for, because it looks like you're trying to exclude something. I thought it might have been an oversight.
Oh, no,
No.
it wasn't, yeah, we weren't trying to
That
exclude
was not the
anything.
intent.
Yeah,
The
we can
intent was
change that.
to follow the sentence preceding it, which was talking about light duty.
I get that.
So that there was no distinction between somebody on light duty and somebody working their regular shift.
All right, so would you be opposed to that change in that last sentence?
I would not be opposed to
No,
it.
that's fine.
It's been in the past. If you had like you still get your full pay. So they're trying to screw you out of 20% pay.
Well, not exactly.
Well-
But what the law says is that we absolutely can do 20, reduce the wage
I'm
by 20%.
sure the law says
Hold on,
that.
I'm still putting it, and what has happened in the past is that we have the ability to move you to a different position, and that is what has been typically done. When you guys brought this up originally, you said you had some concerns because when we moved people to a different position, they were losing their seniority benefit. I said, well, then instead of moving them to a completely different position and reducing their pay, potentially even more than 20%, this solves that problem. This
Yeah, but
says,
that's
hey,
not the way it was in the past. The past was whether you were on light duty, wherever they put you, you still got your full pay, whatever your gig was, whether you were a mechanic or a utility worker or a secretary, whoever you were, they performed light duty. Now, I can also say in the past that there were a lot of instances in utilities where there was no light duty, and you had to sit at the house and collect workers' comp, so.
right, 66%, and that's an option too, but
But-
we would prefer not to do that. I mean, it's better to get the employee back to work, light duty. The
But-
law requires, or the law allows, 20%.
I'm sure the law allows
So the-
everything for
the
you,
employees
but
being
normally they got,
penalized for a
they got
workplace
their full
injury?
pay, John.
No, if the employee could, if we don't accommodate the light duty, then the employee could sit home, earn 66 2/3, or we can assign them to anywhere else. I can say, you got a workers' comp injury, I'm not gonna accommodate you, now you're a file clerk, okay, and I can reduce your pay by 50%.
And what happens to the department managers who still
But
create
never
a
done that
situation
before.
that's unsafe for their workers to work in?
We would hope that you would notify us, because I haven't heard any
Well,
of those.
that's what happens. That's why so many workplace injuries occur.
Okay, well, we have a new risk manager starting. One of that, his function will be to to go out and assess those
Okay,
situations
well, 'cause
exactly.
I've sat in some of those trainings, and I've heard the trainers say that, you know, the county is not liable for injuries that take place at work, if, especially if the employee has already received training.
No, that's false.
It is false.
Right, it's
It
not
is
true.
false.
The only thing that could happen by the law is that if an employee contributed by being negligent, for instance, you weren't wearing a seatbelt and you got in a car accident, okay? And your lack of a seatbelt caused or contributed to your injury, we get to reduce the benefits by 25%. That's what the law allows. The light duty assignment, which is very typical in most places, is a reduction to 80% of your benefits. That's the 80%, you know, and that is our proposal. It's very, very fair. It actually works very well. And it stops us from having to go locate a file clerk position or a receptionist position and change your pay by 50% because we're able to do it light duty. We
Yeah, I'm
reduce the
just saying
pay.
typically the way it used to work is that they would find light duty and you still got your pay for whatever your position was.
Right,
And
and
you-
that's a huge problem for us because
I'm sure it
employees will,
is.
it is, because
I'm sure it
employees,
is.
and not only for us, but for the other employees who are out there who aren't injured and who aren't perhaps taking advantage of the situation, because unfortunately, there are cases where people fall in love with their light duty assignment and they never want to come out of that even though they're not injured anymore. And quite honestly, that 80% is enough of a motivator that they're following their treatment plan and getting back to work and
Motivated.
Could you
Yes,
tell us
motivated.
then, you said it's worked very well, could you tell us in your past working history where you could say that it actually has worked well at some of your different places?
Yeah, absolutely. I had an
Okay.
employee that was on light duty for 2 years at his current rate of pay. We changed the policy. I said to the employee, hey, you know, we're gonna reduce your pay by 20%. He said, well, what if I go to the doctor tomorrow and get a note that says I'm perfect? I go, well, then we wouldn't reduce your pay. He went in, he got the note, he came back, he was back at 100%. In one day, it was amazing. It was
Okay,
completely
and
great.
where was that? Where
It
was
was in
it?
Bradenton.
Bradenton, okay.
Yep, the
Okay.
last place I did it.
But
Great.
doesn't the doctor tell you have to come back to work?
Yeah,
I mean,
yes, and the doctor's only going off of what you're
You're
telling him,
okay.
right. So most of the time, we would expect, and I think that Jim can absolutely tell you where places have been, where we've considered calling in the medical board for the doctor itself in that situation, because we absolutely have seen situations where it's clear we're being played by the doctors.
I thought when you were on compensation, you have to go to compensation's doctor.
Yeah.
So if
absolutely.
compensation's doctor tells you to come back to,
It's not a compensation doctor, there's a list, but I mean, it's a whole multitude. The problem is that, you know, look, sometimes it's not even, you know, intentional on the doctor's part. It might just be, hey, how you feeling today? No, I'm still terrible. Okay, signed off. They're just not doing a lot, and that's what we've seen a lot of times.
Look, we're not here to solve all of the problems that I think we would all agree exist with respect to workers' compensation, either the claim, the processing of the claim, the treatment by the doctors, the payment, so forth and so on. Our goal is not to fix that system. Our goal is to work with this collective bargaining agreement, and to the extent that, Frank, you mentioned the fact that, you know, this would be, from your point of view, a reduction of a benefit that you previously enjoyed.
Right.
Well, welcome to the world of collective bargaining, okay?
Is that what
There was no
So we try to
promise.
talk you out of being in the union.
No?
Thank you, Jim.
No, I'm not.
Appreciate it.
No.
Yeah.
There's never been any promise, and I'm sure your union people didn't promise you this either, I'd be shocked if they did, that the bargaining process does not include give and take, that you could see an increase in benefits, you could see a decrease in benefits. The positions that we take,
Mhm.
they change over time. They change over time because, you know, we start to look at best practices.
Mhm.
We start to look at what is fiscally responsible, operationally responsible, the combination of the two. And it may be that it would be a reduction, something that an employee previously enjoyed as a benefit.
Just like.
We
how
don't
you put
apologize
the-
for
Well,
that.
don't,
That's
I'm
part
not
of the
gonna apologize
process.
for the fact that it usually is on the back of the workers is where you guys try to be physically
Right.
responsible.
We-
Everywhere else, it's a waste pool.
We keep
Thank you
recessing.
for informing me that,
Yeah.
Jim, I appreciate
when,
it.
when you're out on comp and you get your 66 and 2/3%, they don't take taxes out on that, right?
Correct,
Are you gonna take taxes out on that?
yes.
The 80, why?
Why? Because the law allows it. No, excuse me, it doesn't allow it, it requires it, excuse
Yeah.
me, my misstep, it requires it, we don't have a choice.
But aren't you technically still on comp if you're on light duty?
No,
Okay.
I mean, you're in a light duty assignment and you have workers' comp, you're still technically actively on workers' comp, but you're not receiving workers' comp wages, you're being paid by the county.
Okay. Article 39. There's no change in our previous position on this language. There's no change in our position on 46, employee performance evaluation. You had tied this, and we're gonna get to it in just a second, I just want, this is linked in some way to the wage article, so we'll come back to this in a second as well. There's no change in our position on Article 47, the work schedule. No change in our position on holiday in the previous proposal. On Article 53, the wages and salary. So halfway down the page, you'll see the new
Just back to
language.
holidays, so
Sure.
let's talk about holidays.
Okay.
What was the, so there's no change in the proposal, but what's deviating from the status quo, or is there anything?
I don't believe anything is different than the status quo right now. I mean, the only, I have to look, maybe Stephanie can actually answer this, but the way that we do holiday pay right now, is it prorated? Like if you're 4 hours, you would get, or if you're like 20-hour employee, you get 4 hours? Or is that sometimes different?
That's how it's been done all along. I was
Okay.
actually talking to Ro about it the other day. She said the last change, and I'd have to pull it, the last change says they get whatever their work schedule is.
Yeah, that's, and I changed that back, so we're working on, yeah. So,
Right.
no, it's the same as it's being done right now, but it may be different than the career service manual says, although the actual way it's being administered is this way. So the answer is there's no change at all in this language to the way that we're currently paying our employees in holiday pay. And I will say that the only thing that isn't in here that we want to probably add is because we're, the buses are gonna be, the buses are gonna
I
be
was just
running,
gonna get
yeah, I
to
think
that
that,
one,
yeah.
yeah.
So we may wanna add a little, because when I was talking to Phil the other day, he's interested in having language in here that would grant the bus drivers a floating holiday, which is something we've discussed before and which I am very much in favor of, and I believe the bus drivers would like. So we would like to add, I can add like a little paragraph, or we can do an MOU, it doesn't really matter, it affects, and that would simply say that in lieu of the employee being compensated time and a half on the holiday, they would just get to float a holiday, so they get to pick a different holiday, you know, and we would open it up to any time in the year or whatever, you know, whatever's comfortable, so.
The question I have right now, though, Barbara, is we still don't have our holiday calendar scheduled. I don't know if the BOCC is still working on what days they're declared they're gonna run.
Oh, okay, yeah, I don't know, I'll check on that.
Because
Yeah.
the vacation process started back in November for picking vacations.
Right,
And because they don't know, like Good Friday would be the next holiday, and Phil thinks he wants to run that
run it,
one.
yeah,
And some of them he's gonna say we're gonna run, some we're not.
right,
But these people are putting in vacation time, and they gotta know what days they're gonna cover, because
Right.
if they're out of town, they're not
yeah,
gonna come back for that one day, and then they end up
Right.
losing their
yeah.
holiday pay.
So, and that's also the perfect reason for the floating holiday, and I know that the schedule that he put out, some of it has to do with a modified or reduced schedule as well. So for instance, perhaps on Good Friday, because a lot of people have to work, he just leaves the regular schedule so that people don't work. And I think on the next one, he wanted to do a reduced schedule
Well,
so that,
I asked a lot of drivers on that,
yeah.
and they'd rather just run the regular schedule.
Oh, okay,
Well, what happens is if you change it by an hour,
yeah,
the buses start in different locations,
okay,
and we got a lot of new drivers,
okay.
and
It's
they
confusing,
don't end up in the transit relief spot.
yeah,
Their bus is at the mall, or they're down the
Okay.
road, half an hour ahead of it,
yeah.
and both
So-
directions that happened last
Well,
time.
we'll get with Phil then and make sure that it is the way that you guys want it, but I think that what we are thinking is that they were gonna let you float at least 2 of the holidays. And quite frankly, I don't have a problem floating for, all of them, the additional holidays. So we'll talk with Phil and then come up with something. And whether we put it in the contract, John, or do an MOU on it, that's fine with me. We want to make the drivers, want to do what the drivers want.
In the
so.
third paragraph of your proposal, says all regular, part-time employees are entitled to holiday pay.
In proportion to the number of budgeted hours, right. And that's the only question that I have in terms of, that's the way that it's being administered right now, but that's not consistent with the language it may be consistent with your contract language, I have to check that. But it isn't consistent with the career service manual, but even though, so the career service manual says it's whatever hours you work that day. So for instance, let's say the holiday falls on a Monday, okay, but your schedule is Tuesday through Friday, you get nothing. And conversely, if you worked on Monday, you would get 5 hours. So it's not.
That's just for part-time employees.
Right, but that's not fair, because sometimes you're gonna get, the raw end of the deal, right, because the holiday will fall on your off. The other thing is, because we get to flex the schedules, it would allow the manager to say, oh, well, there's a holiday coming up, so in fact, that week, you're gonna be scheduled Tuesday through Friday. And then literally keep you from getting the holiday. That's not the intention, obviously, either. So the most fair way to do it is to say, look, whatever the holiday is, you just get it in relation to your scheduled, or not scheduled, but budgeted hours. So if you're budgeted 20 hours a week, whatever the holiday is, whether it's Monday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever it is, you get 4 hours. You just get exactly, and you get it every single holiday, regardless of whether it falls on your day, on or off. And that to me is the most fair way for the employees.
You agree?
Taken into consideration. I just want to look at the language and why
Yeah,
the
no
whole
problem.
contract article is gutted and replaced with plain brand new language. And it's frustrating when I'm negotiating and the moving party who's proposing doesn't include the existing language with strikeouts in it to see exactly what was removed and what was put in its place.
If you go back one version of my proposal, I think it shows it that way. I'm not sure why I didn't.
Well, I
Those.
think the answer is because remember we had taken the old one and then replaced it with the chart. And then I was like, okay, then I came in, I thought, I'm not a fan of the chart, I don't love the chart, we couldn't really agree on the chart anyway. So I said, hey, let me look at the language the way I've had it in past contracts. And this actually mirrors your Hernando County contract, I guarantee you that, because I wrote it there. So that was the policy. for
Well,
me.
obviously, this committee has to evaluate.
You know how that turned out.
Right.
What's changing from the status quo.
Right, it shouldn't be, yeah, it shouldn't be changing from the status quo. The language might be different, but it
Okay,
shouldn't be.
well, the language is the status quo, okay? It's not the practice.
I know, but that's what I'm
language.
saying, the
Okay,
practice
So
should be
whenever,
the same.
just for the record, because if there's any confusion, because I've heard you say this twice already, when I refer to the status quo, I'm talking about the very specific language in the CBA,
Cool,
not someone's
Practice.
interpretation of what's going on.
okay.
All right, so wages and salaries.
Right. The issue with respect to performance-based pay, when the county gets to the point of establishing a performance-based pay program, what we'll do is, we'll give you notice and opportunity to bargain over that if you want to bargain over it. Obviously, your bargaining unit members would not participate in the performance-based pay program until you consent to it or waive the requirement of negotiating over it, and that's what this language reflects.
In the previous version, do they have anything, okay, it's just a smaller paragraph, I guess.
On the previous version, the bargaining unit members would automatically get included in the performance pay bonus pool.
Yeah. It was a waiver.
You had.
I raised the issue
you
about
raised the
bargaining
issue,
over
so we've changed.
prior
our
to
position.
implementation, so this is what your new proposal
Yep.
allows a free, so to speak, until we either say yea or nay,
Right.
and, about time to get something.
In our last meeting on the wages and salaries, we had discussed confined space. You said that if it's in the job description of the employee, he has to do confined space. Kevin gave me the job descriptions. The people that are doing confined space now, nowhere in their job description does it say they have to do confined space. These guys are all taking it upon themselves to be trained and go down in the hole. And we're not talking thousands of dollars, we're talking $24 a day for a guy that's going to risk his life for the county.
24, how do you, what's the 24?
We were asking for $1 an hour.
Okay,
So,
that's 8 hours a day.
but usually, normally there's 3 people on a
Oh,
job.
okay,
They
gotcha.
take turns
Okay.
because one man can't stay in a hole that long.
Is there a requirement to be certified to go in the hole?
Yes, you have to be confined space trained,
Or
but
is it
like
allowed by the county?
no, it's safety, you're not allowed to go down there.
Is the county paying for the certified training?
Yes, they're paying for the training,
Is
but
it
like,
voluntary to accept the
yes,
training or
they're
not?
you have to volunteer to do it.
So Frank and I have the same position, doing the same thing, and they say, anybody who wants to volunteer for confined space training, raise your
No, I mean,
hand.
that's
He
not-
raises his hand, I don't. We both show up to work the next day, we're both making the same amount of money. They said, Frank, go down the hole. And he said, well, I don't want to. I said, well, you have to, we paid to have you certified. And I'm sitting there with a cheesy grin on my face saying, see, that's what you get for volunteering.
Yeah.
That's what.
Like I said, nowhere in the job descriptions does it say that these guys have to be confined
All
space
right, let me ask you this
trained.
question, and so I want them to hear this.
And I actually turned down confined space training when I was working in utilities. They asked me if I wanted to be confined space trained, and I said, what are you kidding me? Look at me. I'm gonna fit down that hole? I said, no, I don't wanna go to confined space training.
And it's not a part of your job.
It's not
description.
mandatory.
It's not mandatory, it's not required, and
No.
you're being compensated for it.
No, you're
Over and
not
above.
not being compensated right now.
And one last question, is there like refresher certification?
Yes.
How often do you have to?
What is it, 2 years, 3?
That's all
I think it's about every 2 years.
I think it's about every 2 years.
Every 2 years you have
They
to
have
be recertified?
interim
Mhm.
supervisor.
And it's not mandatory, it's voluntary?
Yes.
I guess you guys know.
No, it's mandatory for
It
mechanics.
is mandatory.
For mechanics, yeah. You have to do it. If you're a mechanic, you gotta go do a revamp. You
But
gotta go
that's-
To a station.
I read, it's not in your
Doesn't say
job
that.
title, no. I read through every job title that Kevin gave me that does confined space, and it doesn't, it says you have to do a revamp if you're a mechanic, but you can, that might mean on the top. Doesn't say anything about you have to go down into the hole.
Okay, I understand the revision on performance-based pay. Is it safe to assume that the county is not considering any differential for confined space pay, or is it still an open subject?
That's still an open subject. We'll consider that.
All right, so what else is new on this? Just that
No,
one.
but just let me emphasize, the year one is an option, so at some point, you've gotta tell us which of those options you want. The other provisions will disappear from the bottom of the contract. In option one, well, actually, in option 1, 2, and 3, these are all linked to the date of ratification. There's no retro pay. And there is still, in our proposal, a transportation surcharge for people participating in the transportation shuttle system.
All right.
I got a question under the performance-based pays. Performance-based program, but bargaining unit members will not be included in the pool of employees who can earn performance-based bonuses until such time as the county and union can reach an agreement. So you're penalizing the union members?
No, we're not. We're
What-
recognizing that we have a duty to bargain over any change to your wages during the term of the contract until your union consents to it or reaches an alternative agreement for implementation.
Last language we had said you would be included in it, and you didn't want that, you wanted to bargain over it, so now we put in you're bargaining over it.
I would suggest on this particular issue, direct your questions to John during.
Okay.
That's it.
All right, let's see what focus.
All right, do you have any new proposals for us that we could look at while we're taking a break?
No, not at this time, but, caucus with the committee, and we'll respond to your, are these the only things you believe that are open?
Yeah, those are all the open ones.
Yeah, if you think otherwise, let us know which
No,
ones
I
they're
was just
on.
wondering.
I went through the checklist.
All right,
Down the list.
we're gonna need some time. Want us to call you, at a certain number or something?
Give us an idea how
An
long.
idea, yeah, this next
What do you
one
think?
time. An hour? I'm talking quarter to, is that enough time? Quarter to 12?
Yeah.
All right, quarter to 12, that's down.
If we're done sooner, I'll let you know.
Yeah, okay.
That way we can start asking, we went through this last time.